I helped lead the fight against NAFTA. He voted for NAFTA. I helped lead the fight against PNTR with China. He voted for it.
Bernie Sanders has made at least a couple different appearances now on CNN where he has been willing to call out Joe Biden's record and put his record up against Biden's. So here's the first clip.
What I want to see in the Democratic primary is not, personal attacks or any of that stuff. What I want to see is an issue-oriented campaign. And Joe and I have very different pasts in terms of how we have voted and very different vision for the future. And that is something that we should be discussing. For example, all right, I voted against the war in Iraq. In fact, helped lead the opposition to what turned out to be the worst foreign policy disaster in the modern history of America. Joe voted for it. I voted against NAFTA. I voted against permanent normal trade relations with China, 2 trade agreements which cost us millions of good-paying jobs. Joe supported those agreements. I voted against the deregulation of Wall Street. Joe supported that legislation, which I think, many people agree with me, some don't, led to the Wall Street collapse of 2008.
All right, so Bernie Sanders is doing something here that I wasn't sure he would be willing to do, and that's actually go after Joe Biden's record. So I did a previous video on Elizabeth Warren going after Joe Biden or comparing her record to Joe Biden on some issues, and now Bernie Sanders is doing it, and this is what you have to do. So there are going to be people out there saying, oh, the Democratic Party or this primary, these candidates shouldn't be smearing each other or they shouldn't be going after each other. But that's the whole point of a primary, is to compare your record to everybody else and see who should be the leader of this party going into an election against Donald Trump. Now, I don't call that smearing. I call that looking at history, seeing who was right on the right side of history, seeing who's actually been on the side of Americans and not on the side of corporations and the wealthy. You have to compare these records to ensure that you are actually putting up a candidate that not only can beat Donald Trump, but can actually represent the average American once they are president. So, Bernie only pulled out a few issues here. The Iraq War, trade agreements that prioritized corporate interests over American workers, Wall Street deregulation. I have a whole comparison where I compared Bernie's record to Biden's record and a bunch of historical videos showing that comparison. So I put that up, I think, last month. I'll link to it above the video so you can check that out. But I want to focus more on this next clip. So Bernie was also on Anderson Cooper on CNN, where he really focused on Biden and trade deals and labor rights. Now, check out what Bernie says about his different approach to trade deals. And I'm also going to bust the idea that Biden is on the side of unions.
Former Vice President Biden at his first campaign event today was in front of firefighters union. Obviously, critical organized labor is critical support in a Democratic primary. Are you concerned that Biden can make inroads there, that Biden has a leg up there?
Well, look, I'm running against, I think, 19 other people, so I'm concerned about everybody. But I think when people take a look at my record versus Vice President Biden's record, I helped lead the fight against NAFTA. He voted for NAFTA. I helped lead the fight against PNTR with China. He voted for it. I strongly oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He supported it. I voted against the war in Iraq. He voted for it. So what I am saying to Trump and everybody else is, look, we need new trade policies which protect the interest of American workers and not just the CEOs of large corporations. And I'll give you the thrust and the heart and soul of what we are talking about, is that we have profitable corporation after profitable corporation shutting down in America, throwing American workers out on the street, going abroad, and then they line up at the federal trough for contracts. And what I am saying is, if you want a contract and you are a major corporation, you know what? Don't think you're going to get a contract if you lay off, shut down plants and lay off American workers. Don't think you're going to get a contract if you don't allow workers to organize into a union, if that's what they want to do. If you're cutting back on their health care, you have to be corporate citizens, good corporate citizens. And I think one of the ugly things we're seeing in America today is while the rich get much richer, while corporate profits are soaring, you're seeing tens of millions of workers struggling to make ends meet, people working 2 or 3 jobs. And corporate America now has got to understand that they've got to pay attention to their workers, not just to their stockholders.
So these are the differences that matter. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'm with unions, but it's another to actually have a history on that. I mean, even today, Biden said that he didn't regret his NAFTA vote. Asked if it was a mistake to vote for the free trade deal, he said, no, it wasn't. This is an issue where NAFTA prioritized corporate profits over the best interests of workers. This is a problem, and Biden is unwilling to face his record on this. And despite that, just look at what his record is and compare that to Bernie Sanders. I've said this before, but it's one thing if Biden was the only candidate in this race that had this, super long record, and you could maybe forgive him for some bad votes here and there. But there's someone else in the race that also has a super long record, and that's Bernie Sanders. So when you have somebody else that actually has a fantastic record, was actually on the correct side of these issues long before the majority opinion was there, it shows you who is a leader and who isn't. Biden is a follower and also apparently doesn't understand the impact of his votes. Meanwhile, Bernie is an actual leader and was on the right side of these issues from the beginning. Now, when it comes to unions again, I mean, Biden's first fundraiser, his very first fundraiser, he had a labor-busting lawyer there, a longtime ally of his. So let me break down who this was. Biden boasts strong support from unions, union busters. So this centers around the longtime Biden ally and lawyer Stephen Couzens. So Couzens is the chairman of the esteemed law firm Couzens O'Connor, as Payday Report noted Wednesday. If you go to the firm's website, you can read up on its specialty. Stephen Couzens and his colleagues are eager to help, quote, a broad spectrum of private and public sector employers to prepare for and respond to picket lines, strikes, lockouts, and other economic campaigns, and or avoid unionization through positive employee relations. The firm further assures its prospective clients, our attorneys manage labor relations with a clear eye toward the bottom line. This is somebody who was featured in Biden's first fundraiser. To know what side these candidates are on, whose side these candidates are on, all you have to do is look at where they are getting their money from. When one of their big donors, one of their big supporters and longtime allies is a union-busting lawyer, it kind of spills the beans on Joe Biden. That Joe Biden is not actually for unions, not actually for labor rights, but pretends he is while being actually on the side of the wealthy and corporate interests. So issues like this are important because this is what will separate people who can actually run an honest campaign that can attract new voters out, non-voters out, compared to somebody who's just going to speak to the existing Democratic base. Biden, much like Hillary Clinton, will be able to speak to the existing Democratic base, but his ability to actually reach new voters and get people excited to come out and vote for somebody different, he doesn't have that. Bernie Sanders has that. Bernie Sanders wins independents. Bernie Sanders is actually, as I've shown in the past, actually able to attract some conservative voters because Bernie has similar populist rhetoric that Trump has, except Bernie actually has real solutions for that rhetoric. And it isn't just words, but it's actual policy proposals. So there is a huge difference here between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And it's important that people understand these differences and vote accordingly.